At this point, you should have 3 labeled flasks with some KHP dissolved in water and a couple of drops of phenolphthalein added to each of the flasks. The phenolphthalein is there because it's going to change color. The color that it takes on tells us about the extent of the reaction you're going to do. So let's look at that color. So I have 2 beakers. In the first one, I've dissolved some KHP in water, and then in the second one, I've dissolved some NaOH in water. Phenolphthalein is a kind of a substance that's known as an indicator. It changes color depending on if it's with an acid or a base. Now, KHP is an acid and NaOH is a base. So the phenolphthalein takes on a different color depending on which substance it's with. So if I put a couple of drops of phenolphthalein in with the KHP, you can see that it doesn't take on any color. It's colorless. However, if I take it and then add it to the NaOH, you can see that it takes on a very dramatic pink color. So this color that we see tells us something about the balance of the substances. What you're going to do is you're going to have your NaOH in the burette and you're going to add it to the KHP in the flask down below. The color that it takes on tells us about the balance of the substances. So when the color is colorless, that means that you haven't quite added enough NaOH yet, and you keep going. If the color takes on this bright pink color, it means that there's probably too much NaOH added. So the goal here is neither one of these colors. What we need to do is add just enough NaOH so that the color changes somewhere in between. So that color is going to be a very light shade of pink. So here's how you do that. So I'm going to take flask number 1, put it on the stir. I'm cheating because I have a camera, so I have to do this with one hand. What you want to do is put the white piece of paper down below. Now, I've recorded the starting volume on my data page right here. So my starting volume is 0.09 milliliters. Now, titrations are a technique that take a bit of practice. So that means that our first trial is going to be a practice run. So what you want to do is call this practice. So the benefit of this is it'll get you used to the process, and it'll also give you an idea of how much it's going to take to change color, because that's the goal here. All right, so again, I've got NaOH in the burette. I've got my KHP down below. What you want to do is lower the burette down so that the tip is inside. That way you don't miss. Okay, now I'm going to turn this on all the way. So you turn the valve like that. So as it's mixing, and you want to be mixing this constantly with one hand, and with the other hand you want to be operating the burette. What you'll notice is that the color, you'll see it flash pink and then it essentially goes away. As you get closer and closer to the point where the color change is going to happen, that pink color is going to stay around for longer and longer. So right now I have it on full blast, and I know that it's not near that part yet because that pink color is pretty much going away instantly. But what I'm going to do is once I've got about 20 milliliters of this NaOH in there, I'm going to slow it down, and I'll show you how to slow it down once we get there in a second. Okay, so now I've hit about 20 milliliters. Okay, so what you're going to need to do is add a little bit at a time. So watch what my hand does. Go around. So you do a 180. That'll add a little bit at a time. The faster you go around with your hand, the less it's going to add. So if you want to add a tiny bit, you go around really fast with your hand. So again, you're going to need to swirl this with one hand and do the burette with the other, or you can have your partner swirl for you, if they're nice. So as I'm getting closer, the goal here is to get this faint pink color. This is known as the end point. As I'm getting closer, that pink color is hanging around for longer and longer. That means I'm getting closer. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit, making sure the color goes away, and then adding some more. If you get really good at titrating, you'll get to the point where you can add one more drop and it will turn pink and stay pink. The lighter shade of color, the better. Okay, now remember, this is a practice run. So this color is probably a little bit deeper than you can get. You can actually get a little bit lighter. All right, so that's just the practice run. So let me see about how much it took. All right, so there is my NaOH. It's not focusing very well, but that took about 24 milliliters. So back here on the data table, the endpoint is 24 milliliters. So this is approximate. So it's going to take me about 24 milliliters to do my next trial. All right, let's put that one under there. Now what you're going to need to do, that I'm not doing, is refill the burette and record the starting volume. I'm not doing that because I'm trying to save time. Okay, so let's pretend I did that. Let's pretend I refilled burette and I recorded the starting volume. So I know it's going to take about 24 milliliters. So just like before, you can put it on full blast. It's on all the way. So what's important here is there is an assumption going on. There's a color change that's happening. And we're assuming that when that color change happens, the moles are balanced, as you can see right there. So when you see that light pink color, we're making an assumption that the moles of KHP equals the moles of NaOH. Okay, I have about 12 more milliliters to go. So the pink color gradually starts to stay for longer and longer as you get closer and closer. What's important to realize is you can always put in a bit more NaOH if you haven't added enough. If you put in too much, you can't take it out again. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. You can always add a little bit more. Okay, so this should be happening within the next 5 milliliters. And again, this is what doing this first trial is going to help you with. It's going to help you know approximately when it's going to turn pink, and that's helpful. Okay, so I got my hand on the burette. I'm ready to turn it off. Okay, so I'm turning it off. I'm making sure the pink goes away. I'm going to add a little bit at a time now, so I'm doing my 180s. Almost there. Okay, it's very, very close. So I'm just adding a couple of drops. I'm going around really fast. Okay, so we're there. Now, you can probably do better than I did. That is pretty light, but it is possible to get it even lighter than that. So this would be a pretty good trial. When you're doing this, what's important is don't necessarily trust the color. Trust your numbers. So even if you think you did bad, record the final volume, so get your final volume, and remember, refill this between trials. You don't want to run out. I almost ran out. I'm at about 48 milliliters, so that's pretty close. Write the number down even if you think you got a bad trial and do the calculations, and that'll tell you if you might need to do an extra trial. This has been How to Titrate. I hope you've enjoyed this process as much as I.